Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt Santee. Thrilled that Rusty Keeler is going to be on this episode with me. Hi, Rusty.
Hi, Heather.
So a lot of people listening will already know who you are, and you've been on another episode. But what do you want people to know about you? Why should they listen to you, Rusty?
Oh, yeah. They don't have to. So I'm in the play world, and I come at it, through design, and I'm interested in nature and children and play, and risky play, and so I design natural play spaces, natural outdoor playscapes, and I've been doing that for a long time. Long before my beard was gray, but now it is. And I've done some books and traveled around the world talking to people about play and seeing a whole wide range of kinds of environments and perspectives on play and comfort levels with risky play and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I'm in it like you and the rest of everybody here.
Yeah, thanks. And so I just have to say too, it was so nice to meet you in real life when we were both at IPA USA in Texas, just to plug that conference and to plug their work. I'll mention that too. Awesome. And it's just nice to meet people in real life that you've only seen in a Zoom screen or on Facebook, or whatever. So So that was fun.
Yeah, well, it was funny because it didn't feel like I hadn't met you in person. I don't know. You're pretty real. We're real on the podcast. So.
Yeah. So you wrote a book. Came out a couple of years ago, called Adventures in Risky Play. What is your yes? I'll do this for the people who see the video.
There we go.
Which I appreciate this book so much. It's really helped me, and helps me talk to other people. So today, though, let me just do the quote before I start just talking and rambling about the book. Here's the quote we decided to start with. And this is from very early in the book. It's a long one, so bear with me, everybody. You said, I also understand that in a modern world full of pressures and constraints on children's time in and out of school, something as obvious as play needs some scientific support and lobbying from adults who care enough to recognize that somehow, without us looking, good old-fashioned free play has been limited, sidelined, sublimated, and even decimated for way too many children in our busy, high-achieving, overstimulated, overscheduled, overprotected, overly biased, overly adult-oriented view of what children should be doing, accomplishing, competing, and completing. And I just want listeners to know I did try to convince Rusty to read this in beat poet form. And he refused. So do what you want with that. And then he told me to do it, and I also refused.
I don't know. You kind of got it there.
Yeah, it would have to be where's the good part? You have to do limited, sideline, ed. That's how it goes in my mind. Yeah.
Let me get the bongos out.
Yeah. I should have worn all black. Anyway, so the reason that this one stood out and that I asked you to come on and talk about this specific idea is that I'm always reading and thinking and talking about play, but as I try to write my own book about it, there's been conversations where people say to me, we need to stop defending play. We just need to do it, and the more we defend it, the more it seems like we protest too much. Maybe I'm not articulating it as well as I want to, but there is an idea out there that by defending play and being so vocal about it, we send maybe an opposite message to what we want to send. And what you said here is, no, it's too important. We have to have that scientific support and lobbying. Sorry, it took me a minute to find the language I wanted from the quote. And that it takes adults who care enough to recognize what's been happening. to play. So with that, I'll stop talking for a minute and let you talk.
Yeah. I can see both points of view there for sure. And I think like what I wrote, I think right before that was something like, as far as I'm concerned, play for its own sake is perfectly fine. And I am all for that. And I don't need to know what they're learning. In fact, my limited mind, I can't even perceive all the millions, billions of things that are really going on when children are digging in sand or adding water or having make believe or climbing a tree or any of it. Like, in some ways, anytime you put like a label to try to like show what play is, that completely limits of what's really going on. If we're like saying, well, they're learning science because they're floating leaves in water in the sand area, okay, yes, but like I said, there's millions of things going on. There's neurons happening. This is like this ripe time, early childhood time, of like so many connections happening that are on so many different levels. So and I, believing that play is like the natural way that we as humans or mammals or extended life on the planet, that is like the natural flow of existence and growth and development.
So why do you believe that? Why do you believe that that's the natural flow and the way it happens with children?
Yeah, I think one way from watching it, right? You're just watching it. Yeah, and children, left with some space from adults and adult driving home things. You just see that they are growing, and there's a natural curiosity and wonder and exploration or timidity or and rites of passage and milestones, and you just see that as a natural thing, let alone like my own childhood, my own learning, or my own, even when even in high school, like with the best teachers I had were like playful, and they made like the learning, it was playful learning. So I think just from like the observational.
Sure. So this calls me back to, I'll use the word argument, but it wasn't ever an argument, when Dan Hodgins, who I miss so much, and I used to talk about play and learning, and his question was always, well, why does it have to be about learning? Why do we need to bring that in? And and that sort of kind of what you said, you're right, in the paragraph before this quote in your book, is that, okay, for me, play is enough. I just believe, and I'm talking about me now, not quoting you. I just believe children deserve it. Like it's about happiness and childhood and children's human rights for me. But I also know that young children are learning all the time. So we do have to talk about the learning that can be happening during children's play, is how I wanted to sort of preface that. But you're right, again, and I think I said this when I was talking about schema play at IPA. There's hubris in us saying as adults that we know what children are learning, that we know specifically and definitely what's happening when children play. So I don't, do you have thoughts about that?
Well, right. You can observe like when real learning happens, like, oh, they're building a dam, and when they learn that when they put extra mud behind the blocks, that sticks, and then trial and error, and they learned. But I think it's learning is part of our conversation, because we're sort of in an education setting or conversation with early childhood education, or then as children get older to elementary, I don't know, it's like you have to say that it's learning so that so that parents, adults think that's important.
Yeah. I guess it is part of that lobbying that you talked about in the quote, that we're lobbying for children. And we have to figure out, like a lobbyist has to know what's going to be of interest to the person whose mind they're trying to change.
Yeah.
So if,
right.
Again, like when I talk about schemas in children's play and using that to advocate for play, I talk about the crowds that we're addressing. Like there's the parent crowd, and there's the neuroscience crowd, and the early academic crowd.
Right.
And if we want to try and bring them sort of more towards play, we have to know what they already value and what kind of language is going to be important to them. What kind of vocabulary might be, impactful when we're having those conversations.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things about play, and sort of the funny things about play, is that you can fit it into any of those categories, right?
Yeah.
Like you can talk to the, people interested in brain development. You can talk to STEM people. You can talk to it about social emotional people. You can talk about math, science, the benefits of all that stuff. It fits in all those categories. And for writing grants, or to getting people on your side for play, it does. And it truly does fit all those things, because it is all happening.
Right.
But like when you take another step back and you talk about like children's rights, in some way, we're kind of like just trying to hold space for children. Yeah, I don't really talk about learning. I don't like to personally. And then it's this idea of play. But even play, that's another thing. We could have a long conversation about the word play and all the different, connotations it has for people. But really what we're talking about is children being. They're being. And as they are being, they are growing, and they're with other children, or they're with adults, or they're in the natural world or the unnatural world. They are changing as we watch them, in terms of development and being, having space to be, so in some ways, like a play worker in the adventure playgrounds in Europe and here, where often their job is sometimes to take the parents to the side, to get the parents out of there, be like, hey, could you help me lift this stuff, right, with a wheelbarrow, so that the kids can have this space to themselves. And maybe in some ways, for us, lobbying for this, trying to sell it, trying to reassure people that this is okay, or here's all the things you can check your boxes, because all the schools and early childhood developers or directors of preschools and everything, they need to check their boxes.
Right.
So it's almost like we can help them with the language to say, well, you are checking those boxes for the people that they need to answer to. And meanwhile, for the child, they are having more time, space, and materials to be and grow and exist and awaken to their life on the planet.
Yeah. I like that. I really like that idea of holding space for them to just be. In fact, I like it so much, I can't think of what the next thing I was going to say was. I got kind of swept away listening to that. But I think the word play, just in and of itself, has, I don't know, it feels like it's become divisive. Like people are getting more territorial about their practice, and how do I want to say this? Or are co-opting the word play to still fit into their adult-led sort of structured, maybe even academic practices there. So that's where we see things like guided play and scaffolded play and play with a purpose. They aren't really necessarily moving more towards the kind of play you and I are talking about, but they've realized the importance of using the language, and that's interesting to me. It feels like a shift, but I don't know. What do you think about
I mean that more people are saying play or talking about play or using play as a part of their story?
Yeah. But I don't know that it's always really a change in practice. Like we're really good in early childhood just in early childhood in general, about changing the name, but not necessarily the game, as different ideas become more popular. And I feel like I'm seeing that with play.
I'm just saying, like, for me, I grew up in the kind of the 70s and the 80s. Sure. Like, I was early childhood in the 70s, yes, and first grade, like, but it was like, I was aware, I wasn't completely aware because I didn't know, but in another sense, I was aware that there were like alternative things going on. And people were like, seemed like they were honoring play and kind of alternative forms of education, or there was a real time of, I guess maybe it was kind of like the post hippie movement that where they were incorporating things. Like, my first grade teacher introduced us to like sprouts in our sandwiches, you know, and there's a piano. There's a piano in our first grade class, and the desks were all over the place. So there's carpets and the big huge wooden spools in the classroom, and you could so it felt like at that time, like, oh, they get it, that it's like organic, and that children, looking at how children really maybe function in broader ways than just lined up. Then, of course, I don't know, it tightened up. And then, and even now I struggle with, at least, my children, I have young children, they're elementary, but still how sometimes elementary still feels like this 1950s thing. And then to try to get play at that level, like cram in there and open it up, because all children of all ages past early childhood need all those kind of opportunities.
So maybe I need to clarify what I was thinking, for anyone who's listening who, like, I don't know, is feeling defensive about what I just said about the modifiers. But so I think in like kindergarten, first, second grade, which is still part of early childhood, and I tend to, when I use early childhood, I tend to be thinking only about birth to 5 because that's my context. Those modifiers become a tool of advocacy because they are in a system where they don't have as much freedom. So maybe the people in those settings who are talking about guided play or scaffolded play, play with a purpose, have to do that to be able to try and fit more play into those structures, that for a variety of reasons are becoming much less playful, or have been much less playful for a long time. But in early childhood settings, I feel like it's a different connotation for me early childhood, like birth to 5, where when people are talking about scaffolded play and play with a purpose, it's more that they're advocating for their adult-led practices. Oh, that was just me brainstorm, just whatever. So I guess I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, like play, when they use play, or people use play, is adult-led versus child-led.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that gets confusing because teachers feel like, well, I need to be doing something, or I need to be teaching, or I need to find teachable moments, or, and we believe in play, but was it your idea as the adult? Was it you directing it? Was it you even, or are you, playful, and that often, steers the play. And children can be fine with that, or they go along with it, or they realize, okay, this person's the boss, the head of the thing here, so I'm following them. But I think what you and I are talking about are more like that kind of freedom of the flow, the natural flow of play, where we adults we have no idea. It's in some ways you support it, but you stand back and be amazed. But then also, I think I've been getting to this place with risky play, the idea of risky play, and talking about, where people's comfort levels are and all this kind of stuff. How do you allow play to happen, and things that make you nervous? And so I'm interested in I became fascinated kind of by where everybody is on kind of this spectrum of comfort and all this. But the more I see play, or see adults being with play in really good ways that I love, it's almost like the risky play is that's just the doorway. That's just letting kids really be. And in some ways, then it's like the good, the bad, and the ugly, or the scary, or the whatever. And then that, I feel like that is where the real life happens. Once the adults aren't just being like, no, don't do that, don't do that, you're going to get hurt, you're going to poke your eye out, you're going to, or whatever. Once we can, as adults, can like, okay, be comfortable in ourselves and confident in ourselves, then when children are playing or being, then that, to me, that's where the magic happens for children, their imaginations, what they create. But also, I think then that really shifts what the adult's role is when they're working with children, from just being this police person or this protector to like helping them navigate, because things come up. When suddenly children have the freedom to just be, well, there's going to be conflict and there's going to be questions. So there's, and especially the early childhood world, to me, that's, I think, is that social, emotional of like, well, then how the teacher then can be helping children to navigate some of the sticky things that are going to, all that happen when children are being. And that, to me, that's the beauty and the kind of the spirit that I love of the early childhood world. But it's almost like if we can, I'll just let that sit for.
Yeah. You got me again, man. That was good.
All right.
But I wrote down 2 little notes of things I want to kind of hit again. So I realized as I was talking a minute ago that I'm sort of using child-led play when I mean free play, when I mean just like, because I feel like when we talk about child-led play, the adult still is maybe too involved or feels like like we're watching the child, but it's still us getting in there and doing something with what we see that makes it valuable. Does that make sense? But where we're talking about just free play, just being, we don't have to be involved as much. See, this is what happens. I get a good guest who makes me go in all different directions, and I can't tell if I'm making any sense or if I'm just spitting out words. So anyway, I'll just put a pin in that. Never mind. Don't feel like you have to do anything with that. I need to think about that more.
I want to see where it's going here.
Yeah, just so I feel like child-led is good. I don't know. I'm thinking about the adult role and what you said about how adults feel like they need to be doing something to be teachers, or they don't quite know what their role is when we're talking about children just being. And I need to think about that more.
No. I mean, there's a center in Ithaca where I live, where both my boys went through, corner of the sky. And there's pictures in this book, there's pictures in maybe all my books of what they do, because I love it so much. And the 2 women that run it they are incredible, and they are so like on, but there's like zero suffocation of the child's needs or the child's what they want to do. The children have really complete freedom until there's like real danger or there's real conflict. But I just feel like it's like the adult that when I see the stuff, the work that I really love, it's like completely honoring the children and honoring where they're going and supporting them, and knowing that all children they're working it out on like a deep level, more than are they going to slip off that log, or are they going to, they might, on that level they might. But when they get in conflict with a friend over something and they need a little support working it out, I think that's the beauty of when the person comes in with their heart and with love and awareness and their creative intelligence to in a loving way help them, support them.
And that's such a different way of thinking about the phrase intentional teaching, which is a phrase I use and love a lot, but it can be used more academically. But when I listen to you there, I'm thinking about intention being entirely different, where we're just waiting until we're really truly seeing that they need something from us. And that's where our intention comes in. And that's where all the learning that we've done and the skill that we've developed over our careers, or, those things we feel like we're wasting when children are just playing. That's where that can really come into play, is when our observation shows us that there really is a need in that moment, and we can intentionally choose how to respond.
Yeah. And if you're tuned in, if you're like really tuned in and you really take that job seriously, like you even know, like moments before, you can feel things when you're like, I think I'll just move a little closer to these two or these.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like this swirl of intuition.
Yeah. So the other thing that you've mentioned several times is just the idea of observing. And you've mentioned it as you're talking about play in a broader sort of context, but what does observing, what do you mean when you talk about observing and then deciding? Because a lot of us in early childhood, if we've taken classes, gone to trainings about observing, it's really still very structured, and it's like we're observing at a specific time because reports are due, or we're observing at a specific time because it's time for parent-teacher conferences. But I feel like what you're talking is about daily, all the time, in the moment, paying close attention.
The teacher, the adult, observing children and the flow of play in the moments. And yes. And the adult's role in that situation, right? It could go in a million billion different ways, different directions, right? You could get pulled into the play. You could be asked to lift something. You could, you might be, have to do it with what I was saying before about helping some social emotional kinds of things. But I think when we step back to, this kind of like the lobbying for risky play, or really which is just lobbying for play, which is really lobbying just for being, right?
Yeah. Okay. Love it.
The observation helps people see what the reality of a situation is when something makes us nervous compared to what our worries or our fears are. I'm been interested in that, of like, we see a child with a stick and we could fear, you'll poke your eye out, it's a weapon, we don't have weapons at school, or you're going to hurt somebody, or rules, or things that we think are rules, or what we think our other teacher's going to say, or what our director's going to say, or what we think licensing is going to say. And then, what stops us from allowing play to happen, or that stick. Like everything we do in our life, like it's this mind that we have that is both protective and helps us, and is creative, but then also sometimes blocks the real flow of what can be happening. And I think early childhood settings are such a great example of this, and the difference between reacting to our fears and stopping stuff versus observing. Like saying, observe, okay, with that child with a stick, just watch for a second. 2, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. Okay, they're not hitting somebody, they're in control, they look like they're purposeful, they're going to do something. They're using it to stir some imaginary pot of stew or goulash or poison,
Yes.
Okay. Oh gosh. Well, I'm glad I just observed instead of just stopped it. So I think just watching, and some of it is also just when you observe, it's also like the beauty of seeing just child development happening there in front of you, and what happens day to day, and to see, also with, your own children, or the moments that we have, and our own selves, or
and what an honor to be part of that, like to be able, that's what I think all the time, if I have an opportunity, and I don't work directly with children anymore, to my sorrow. I'm just working with adults at the college, and whenever I have a moment to just be in a space where children are being children, and are experiencing that flow of play, and I have the knowledge to attach what I see to child development or whatever. I just feel like that's such a tremendous honor to be allowed to be part of that. And it's sort of humbling for me to just see that happen. And I compare that to where I was early in my career when I felt like I needed to be in control of everything, and learning only happened if it was something that I had planned and was leading. I'm just grateful for the journey to have started there and learned what I learned from there, and now be in a space where I can just be in awe of what's unfolding in front of me without a whole lot of action from me. Explicit action, I guess I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I had a question and it's gone. So before we started recording, I ran another quote by you from later in the book, and this is when you're talking about being barefoot in programs, letting children be barefoot.
Oh yeah.
And so the context is that in this bit, you're specifically talking about sort of defending that to outsiders or people who might not be on the same page with us. And you said, to put the world right side up, we need to move away from old ways of thinking. The children can't do it for themselves. They shouldn't have to. We need to speak up for children. We need to find the ways to make it right. So can I ask you just to talk a little bit about that? Not, specific barefoot, that's fine, but just overall thinking about play.
Yeah. No, this is good. Good to think about. Like what is our adult role to support play, to support children, to support the rights of children? And a lot of times I think I'm saying, like, sometimes the work is the unglamorous stuff, the stuff around the edges, to enable children to be, again, if we keep coming back to that, for them to play, for them to grow, to them to have that freedom. And it's almost not even like freedom, they should just be able to be.
Yeah.
So, but it takes a lot of work by the adults around the edges that isn't even directly connected to the children. It's talking to parents so that they understand what this philosophy is about allowing children to play or take risks or get a little dirty or be barefoot. Getting on the same page with other teachers, talking to the licensor, to show that you've done risk benefit analysis and mindfully making these decisions to have fallen logs, and it's not an accident. We are doing this mindfully, or it's just like changing kids out. I think about this, like, out of their muddy clothes or into their muddy. Oh my gosh, what a pain in the butt. We only were outside for 10 minutes, but it took this long. But it's like that's our role. That's not. I think in the book I talk about this idea of like, oh, that's more work. But if we rethink of that and say it's not more work, it's the work.
Yeah.
The work.
Yeah.
And even this, the idea of lobbying for play. Like, I did stuff also with elementary, trying to reimagine recess and having loose parts and more play and less rules and all that kind of stuff. The children, all the ages, once they know, oh, it's okay that we can build with these boards and drag them around the playground and do, it's okay, we can do this. Yes, it's okay. Once they know it's okay, they're off to the races, rock and roll, and going for it, right? They're playing, they're being there, all that kind of stuff. But the work is the adults, the talking with the other adults and getting people on board and working it through, and the hierarchy of adult and children, or the way things always were, or the rules that you think. It's like that's that hard work, so that, again, so that you're protecting that space so children can just so in some ways it's like the observation and the being with children, even though that is difficult and challenging and and very such important work, but it's like that outside, around the outside, working with the adults and the rules and all that kind of stuff.
Because that's a reality, right? There are people looking in from the outside, not understanding, using their own lenses of, their own comfort levels. And we, maybe it's an opportunity, maybe it's a responsibility, maybe it's both, to spend time helping them see what you see, or helping them understand that there is intention behind what you're doing. I think for a lot of people who really believe that they just want to have a space for children to be children and to play, still feel that pressure, whether it's your directors popping in with a tour or, the parents who are there, families who come in to pick up and see, maybe what looks to them like something is unsafe or something is unstructured. That's where we have a strong role. But also I feel like that for them, they feel like, it's just too hard to have all those different conversations with the people who are looking in, that I feel this pressure by. I mean, even now I'm a firm believer. My mind has changed about weapon play, but there are still times when I was working with young children a few years ago, would stop it just because I didn't want to have the conversation with the other adult in the room.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important piece of this lobbying
Yeah.
or advocating or whatever too.
Yeah. It can be totally intimidating to have to, justify or have the right language to talk to teachers or licensing or the director or whoever, about what you're doing, that in your heart is right, but to have the words or and is that really my job to have to do that or whatever. So we limit it, or we take away recess or running on recess on elementary levels. We've heard of all sorts of wacky stories, or that we don't push back against, licensors who are like, I've heard like, you can't have spoons in your sand area, metal spoons, or, whatever. There's
Is that a risk? Are they afraid of injury because of metal spoons?
Yeah. It's like,
That's so funny.
what do they eat with?
Yeah.
But that, I think that's the thing that's kind of gotten us in trouble now, and we're so far that we've kind of done like, oh, I don't have the energy, or it's a little too intimidating, or that. But so that's why play has that beat poetry line of all those things that happen.
Yes,
because we've sort of we shut down a little bit. So I feel like now's the time. It's as good a time as any, but it's even more desperately the time now to all right, you early childhood amazing professionals who do such important work on the planet. It's like, your stuff, and in your heart what's right, and you've also studied and continued to grow and think and read and converse, and it's like you can form those words. You can, and they are. Everybody is. I've learned. I learned just because I see amazing people doing amazing things.
Right.
But there's also people who are still kind of learning those chops of how you do that. But the children,
I keep saying sort of joking, but mostly not joking, that this is a perfect time for this kind of advocacy, because there's such a shortage of early childhood staff right now. No one's going to get fired unless they're absolutely posing harming children. So now's the time to flex your play muscles a little bit, because they need you. And so I don't know. I don't know what message that's sending, if I'm going to get myself into trouble. But I feel like that's one of our opportunities in a bad situation, is that we can really be more intentional and comfortable and proactive about the things we believe about play during this shortage. I don't want to make light of it, because I know that really is the shortage really is an issue and causing some stress, but I feel like it's also an opportunity.
Well, I think you certainly got more clout during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like when early childhood settings were not in session, and parents were like, oh my gosh, we're desperate. And then the workplaces, they could, if the parents couldn't, go to work, and then society rests on the shoulders of early childhood educators. So I always think well, if you all banded together, man, you could get a lot. You do have clout, and there is incredible importance, and maybe new people realized it, and maybe there's new things that you could lobby for.
And this is a whole other topic and a whole other episode, but then the whole conversation about the learning loss that happened during the pandemic comes in and crushes a lot of that, even in programs for children under 5, because we feel that academic push down pressure. So So I guess that's an element we have to be aware of as we advocate for ourselves and our work in this time. Any last thoughts, Rusty? Things you wanted to say that I didn't let you say?
No, I mean, great
wrap up?
conversation. We could just keep going on and on and on.
Yeah.
But I'm just so glad you're out here having these conversations.
Oh, thank you.
Getting
That's
people,
nice.
yeah.
Yeah. I've been keenly aware through this whole conversation. I feel like I'm babbling and not making sense. And it's probably just because I hold you in awe. But exactly. I mean, I know
That's
Mike
nice.
Huber, and he likes to listen to the podcasts and then plan episodes where he challenges me to talk more about something that didn't make sense. So through this whole episode, I'm always like, oh, Mike's going to ask about that. Mike's going to want to ask about that.
What's he going to say?
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking time and being willing to have this conversation. I hope you'll come back again.
Let's keep it going.
Put you on the spot while we're still recording, and you have no option but to say, I'd love to be back on.
He said it.
Everyone heard him say it was okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, good, for your work, for the book. You've got, is there anything you want to plug? You've got a YouTube channel.
Oh yeah. I mean, my newsletter.
You've got a website.
I got a website, rustykeeler.com, and I like to put out newsletter with resources and funny things. I do kind of like a fun film Friday, just these little, couple minute clips of, nature play, risky play, weird, fun stuff that has something to do with the topic here. And help people think about their yards. Oh, here, I'm gonna go on. Keep this recording.
Go ahead. I'm recording. Still going.
So I also help people with their yards or think things through and, consult about how to add nature, improve their yards, think about play, any budget, any yard, any budget. That kind of stuff too. And that's always fun.
I love it. I love it. I know I've used some of your videos lately because a local program is completely redoing their playgrounds. And I was like, before you make any decisions, watch some of these. So I appreciate it. Good. All right. Thanks again, Rusty.
Yes. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks everybody for listening to another episode, and we'll see you again next week.